All right, good evening, guys. This is the Corel Draw. This is kind of just get to know you Corel Draw. We're going to work on some little things that we can maybe show you to help you do different things and whatnot. Marvin is my co-teacher tonight. He will be running a little bit late. I do apologize for my voice. I've been battling laryngitis for the last 3 days with a head cold. So you have to deal with nasally Nicky, and I'm trying everything I can to force enough air out so you can hear me properly. We're going to go over some of the basics in Corel Draw. I will open up to a Q&A in between. Once I see Marvin pop in, he will also be able to answer some questions. Right now, we're just going to go over some of the fun tools are in Corel. I'm assuming that most of you have Corel, and maybe you don't know of different tools that are in there. I know that there was asking of questions of how to warp text, how to do different things. Now, as I speak in every single tutorial that I teach, this is the way my brain learns. There is no right or wrong way. They're just terminology is the same, and that's what a great tool for you to also go back through and look on YouTube if you need to for that particular task. Again, there are different things that you can do. I try to let you guys know when you guys can't see my keyboard of the functions that I'm using, and we'll go through all of that. So welcome to that. I want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you guys so much. Now, let's talk about Corel versus Photoshop. Corel is a vector-based program. It basically allows for cut files, all right, where Photoshop does not. So there's the main difference between Photoshop and Corel. Okay, so I use Corel for my Roland because it has the cut file feature, and that's the program that works with my Roland. A lot of people make their SVGs over in Corel, again, for the cut file feature. If you're a Silhouette and Cricut user, you guys know how to pretty much make SVGs. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop over to Corel, and I'm going to give you kind of a tour right now, and wait for Mr. Marvin to pop in. So here is Corel. All right, so this is the Corel basic screen. I make mine black. You can keep yours white. You can change the color of your background. For this, I like to use the white or the black because it's easier on my eyes. I do a lot of designing at night, so that makes things a lot easier. Shai, I'm going to be hiding the people, so you're going to have to let me know if somebody's asking a question because I'm not going to be able to see them. All right, we're going to shrink this down just a touch so I can recenter this a little bit because it makes it really hard to see my bottom with the words. There we go. Okay. So at the bottom of the screen here, you can see I've moved my color palette. So you can move your color palette in anywhere shape you want. A lot of people keep it on their side. Some people like to have it at the bottom. You can change where you dock it. Okay, so docking mine is all under here. Now, if you're looking at this going, Nikki, I don't have all those color palettes. How do you have them? So we're going to start off with that before we get into all the nitty gritty, because people, that's the first thing you guys all see is all the pretty colors, right? So what you're going to want to do is go into tools, and you're going to want to go into, I'm sorry, hold on, I got to get there again. You want to go into Windows and then color palettes. And then from color palettes, you want to go into palettes, okay? It comes up here on the side for me. It may come up at a different spot for you. The palettes that I have checked for me, so I have my Roland one because I need it for my cut files, but I also have it checked in document palettes, my palettes, so that one you wouldn't necessarily need. You have this arrow key, you drop it in and out. And so I have palette libraries. I also have Spot. So I open up Spot. And in Spot, I have the Pantone and Roland. You guys, unless you have a Roland, you wouldn't need that. In the Pantone, I have the coded version checked. And then I also have the RGB palette. So this top one is my RGB palette, and this bottom one are my Pantone colors. Okay, so we have that. Now, in order to get it so where you can see 3 rows, if you go over to the left-hand side and you click on your arrow, you will see rows. You can change it from 1 to 2 or 3 rows so you get the most visual interest when it comes to your color palettes, okay? And then you can just scroll down, and now you can it makes it a lot easier. Instead of it scrolling across the bottom, you can make it so it goes up and down this way, a lot easier. Okay, so that's where that is. These little dots, it's hard to see it on my screen, but there's little dots right here. If you see how my arrow changed to the, like I look at it as a four-way stop sign, right? That's what's going to drag and dock your items to different places. And that's, you use that to move things and dock it. Okay. So let's see. Now let's talk about the Corel as in general. This is your canvas space. All right. I'm just going to start.
Welcome, Marvin.
Yes, thank you, Marvin. I will start going over things and then I'll hand it over to you, okay? Sound good, sir? You can unmute yourself. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so while he gets himself all settled, let's just talk about some different things and where you find them. Now, your canvas space is something that you can, please mute yourself, whoever. Your canvas space, you can change. So this, for me, I have it set so that it's the same size as the size I print on, which is 13 by 19, but you can change this to any size. So that's your canvas space. Your tools down here, there's your move tool. This is basically, I call it the node tool. It's a shape tool. And there's fly out menus and all of this stuff, okay? So you have all these different fly out menus. So I have crop, I have knife, eraser. Eraser's a good one for those mistakes. We like to erase our mistakes. Zoom, pan, you can freehand. You can also make some really cool artistic stuff as you keep going down. You have all of these type of tools and whatnot. Now, I will tell you in other versions of Corel, and there is a bug or something, you might not have this thing called common shapes, and if you don't, it might be hidden. I had to help Jody find her. She couldn't find it and why it wasn't docked there. But we made a shortcut key, which you can make shortcut keys in Corel. Excuse me, and it will come up when you use a shortcut key, but I do have mine there. Now, what is common tools? You're going to ask me if you don't have it. What it basically is up at the top here, and this is your toolbar. You have this fly out menu, and it just gives you some basic shapes that you can make. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's a fun tool, especially when you're tired of making a heart. You can go in and make a heart. Okay, so there's that. Keep going down, you have your text tool. All right. This is just for different angles and vertical and horizontal dimension. This just gets more into the design work when you're also doing other things. This is where your shadow, contour, blend, distort, envelope, extrude, sorry, and block shadow. This is your transparency tool is over here, your eyedropper tool, and your paint bucket. Now there's lots of fun tools there. Now we're going to go across the top. So you have your file. When you're doing stuff in Corel, you want to import stuff in. If you're going to open it, you're going to open a CDR file. If you want to import a shape, you have to import it in, okay? And then if you want to save it, you have to export it out. Unless you want to save it as a CDR file, then you would just hit save or save as, and you give it a name. But if you want to, let's say you want to save it as a JPEG or you want to save it as a PNG, you're going to have to hit the export, which is because there's nothing on my screen. It's not showing up right now. So that's the difference with how to export and import stuff for Corel. Now, if you go into your edit tools, you have your edit tools, you can clone, you can paste some of the stuff. As we do different things, these will show up. All right. You get into now your view. Now for me, for my view, I have my ruler on, my guidelines, my alignment guides, which is, I have the object over here. So if I were to go into view, I can hit the alignment tool. I don't know where it went or where everything went actually. You can hit those and I'll pull it right back up because for some reason my alignment tool is missing. Here we go. Here it is. So I have the alignment. I will also put my contour over here and you can leave them so they're docked on here. There's also the, there's another one and I can't remember. It's basically so you can repeat a project and now I can't remember what the name is. Marvin will have to tell you.
Step and repeat.
What is it? Step and repeat. Yes. I just have to find it because I can never find it. It was just there.
The majority of the dockers are under the window option. So window and then dockers.
Oh, right. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to go with Nicky has total brain fog right now. All right, so let's see. I need my, step and repeat. I want that over there. He'll talk about this stuff with you guys and why this is a really cool tool that now I have docked over here. My objects, I never used to have this open, and it drove Marvin crazy because it was something that I had in Corel or in Photoshop, which is the layers panel in Photoshop. Well, I never have it open in Corel. He's like, why don't you have? I don't know, but now I do, and now I understand it. Just path of least resistance sometimes. Okay, so I will get in here and I will keep going. So you have your layers. Obviously, you can move things back and forth. How can you move things back and forth when you have a layer, right? And we're going to just we'll get there in a second and how to do that. We're going to show you how to make things move from a back of a document to the front of the document with just some shortcut keys. I'm big on shortcut keys. I don't know if necessarily Marvin is, but I definitely am. So you have that. I will find my contour tour. It's here somewhere. It's just not highlighted because probably because I don't have anything on. Nope, there it is. There it is. Okay, so my contour is over here too. I don't know why none of my stuff is docked, but something happened. So your contour is how you add basically that outside edge to your image. Again, we'll work on all of these. Your alignment tool is basically how you align it up, down, horizontal, cross, all of that fun stuff. And then your step and repeat. These are tools that I have docked on mine typically. And they're definitely keys, things that I use frequently now in Corel. You have your effects tool. Now your effects tool is just basically like the stuff you see in Photoshop. Go in and grab all these tools and see what's in there. You can change, you can make Gaussian blurs, you can go in and you can change the color of something. You can go in and do different things. These are some of the same tools that you can find in Silhouette, some of the same tools you can find in Cricut when you want to do some of those things, and some of the stuff you can find in Photoshop. So it's just, some of them just have different names. Bitmap, we'll show you and we'll talk to you guys about Bitmap if you're new to the whole thing. You have text up here. Again, it's for aligning your texts and making columns. Table, tools, go into options. When I want to customize stuff, I go into customization and in tools. We'll get more into that in a little bit. And then the windows, your windows panel is where we found our color palettes that we put at the bottom, your dockers and toolbars and whatnot. So there's other stuff here. We're going to talk about it more in going through all of this. You're going to see, I believe Marvin's workspace is white. Mine is black. You could tell the difference between the two of us. So you have that. This is just a quick overview now that he is here. I will also be helping him in the background, so he'll be able to share. So I'm going to unshare real quick. Okay, so what he's going to do is I'm going to allow him to share his screen. Just let me get to him real quick.
And I guess I'll ask, like, since that's a good point to just ask if anybody has any questions,
Yep.
you know, kind of as we transition also, you know, what you went over, anything to kind of expound upon, or yeah.
I'm going to make, hold on, let me see. I think I can just make you a co-host. I thought I could. No, okay. I'm just going to allow you to share your screen, Marvin. All right, so no questions so far. Pretty basic so far, nothing too crazy.
I got a question.
Yes.
Go for it.
So when you were just going over all this stuff, you were just naming what they are. If we
Yes.
come to an unfamiliar thing, can we ask what it is actually?
Yes, and that's what he's going to do. I was just.
I figured. I was just making
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. We'll
Thank
get there. Yep. So he's going to go over that. Marvin, I will toggle back once you're sharing your screen. I'm going to toggle back to see what the questions were. I don't think there was too many. I think it was basically Patty wanted to know how to warp text.
All right. Yep.
And that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
I want you to be able to show them some of the fun things that they can do. And if you have questions, please start putting them in the chat as he's starting to go over it. I will interrupt him and say, hey, we've got this question, because we can't always see the people asking questions when we're teaching with our screens being shown. So please go ahead. You can go ahead, Marvin.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the first things I want to touch on, I don't know if you did before I hopped on, Nikki, was just kind of the basis or foundation kind of behind vector-based programs. And that's exactly what Corel is, as hopefully sharing now. And so I kind of made a little bit of a overview and kind of stepped through some pages to try to help me anyways to, you know, have a process to, you know, just flow through some information. But ultimately, Corel Draw is a vector-based program. And what does that mean is essentially kind of what I have highlighted here at the bottom is that the graphics themselves are represented by specific lines and curves, as opposed to raster images, your JPEGs, PNGs, and whatnot are by pixels. And they kind of just laid out different file types between the two that, you know, a lot of people are familiar with those, but maybe not necessarily what the difference is. And so I'll try to explain that a little bit as well. There's definitely a difference there, and, you know, some advantages, some pros, cons, that sort of thing. So here I try to show, in terms of the vector objects, their shapes and curves and lines, and I just have basic shapes here, but each one of these has a fill color and an outline color that can be easily changed with simple clicks within the color palettes itself. So any of the shapes, you know, like I said, I just did basic shapes here, like Nicky had pulled up earlier within the common shapes, or just the standard rectangle and circle, but pretty much any of the SVG files that you've used in the past. You know, if you have a Silhouette or Cricut or anything like that, all of the cutting lines are always vector based, and they're, you know, represented, like I said, by those lines, by the curves and whatnot. And ultimately, the advantage of that is that they can scale infinitely to pretty much any size without any sort of loss in quality. In terms of the color within Corel Draw, it's really basic in terms of changing and manipulating the color. Your fill color is literally just a left click of any color, and you can change the fill of any shape. And then the outline itself, let me turn this off. You can change your actual outline thickness. I think that's this guy, sorry. And then you can also change the color of the outline by right clicking while you have shapes selected. So it's really quick and easy to go through and change color of different shapes and objects and whatnot.
Marvin?
Yep.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So what's the difference by changing, and here's why I'm going to ask this, what's the difference by changing the outline versus adding the contour?
So the main thing there, so like with the roll-in, for example, depending on what you're printing, like your cut line will only do the very center of that line. As opposed to, if you're going to print though, you can just thicken that up and make it thicker, and it will actually print all of this. But when you go to cut, for example, like with your roll-in, it'll only cut that very center of that line, regardless of how thick that is.
Okay, but why would we why would we want to thicken the line on, I mean, that's still a contour, correct? I just want to make sure.
It is, in a sense, yeah, it
Okay.
is in a sense. Yep, absolutely. So from a design perspective, or, you know, for sublimation type use, there's really no difference there in which one of those you use.
Okay, just wanted to have them clarified.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely. So the best way I can try to explain more of the photo, just as a comparison, a photo type file or pixel-based file, the raster images, is this kind of grid set up here, is that each individual square or pixel, and I haven't exaggerated here, represents a color of your particular file. So those picture-based files are literally individual dots that create shading. And so as you try to scale that, though, most everybody has seen where you get pixelated images. And it's because those pixels, as you try to scale them, they have to be represented by individual colors, and they don't scale the same way that these actual lines do. And so that's a big difference in between your vector-based programs that are these lines and shapes as opposed to individual pixels. Hopefully that makes sense. And so I've got kind of an example here of the difference of those. And here, you pretty much cannot tell the difference between these two files in terms of image quality. Both of them, I have them sized right now to just a 5-inch circle. But as I zoom in and essentially enlarge, you'll start to see some of that pixelation in here and the discoloration, where it's just not sharp. If I zoom back out and do the same on the other one, this is an actual vector file. And one way you can do that on a file that has, I'll zoom in here in a second and really show you how detailed it gets. When you click on an object here, I don't have my objects or the layers kind of panel shown on purpose. You can't really see between the two. But if you go to click and drag, see how this just does the square? It's because that's it's just the picture itself. I believe this was a JPEG that I brought in. And so it just shows that overall square. if I grab this one, you'll see it has the individual curves that make up that file. And each one of those curves and shapes basically has their own coloring and shading within it. And so this guy, when I zoom into it, there's no loss in quality. And so literally I can blow that up to billboard size and it's going to print incredibly well.
Right. Beth has a question. Do you bring them in as a SVG or do you convert them to an SVG?
If you have SVGs, it's best to bring them in as SVGs so that it has all the layer shape type stuff in it. As opposed to, for example, like if you work in, say, Silhouette with SVGs, you can, export as a PNG, for example, and you can bring PNGs in also. But it's definitely better to leave anything that is a vector shape that has those shapes and curves to it, to leave it in that native form as opposed to converting it to a pixel file. If you can.
Because you can take it apart too.
Right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this right here, yeah, good point, Nikki. So as this itself that has all those individual pieces, this can get broken apart. I can actually ungroup and show the objects panel here. And this is complicated because I have multiple pages. But this gradient, for example, that's in the back, so I can pull that out.
Right. So yeah. Beth goes, but if you want to design outside of SVGs, then what? And then Cheyenne asks, so then the vector essentially prints better.
Yeah, it can. So as long as you're printing it like 300 DPI, which is kind of the standard for most sublimation stuff, you're probably not going to notice a difference on the smaller scale stuff. Where you can start to see a difference is more so for like stuff that we're doing, Nikki, on the larger format scale, where some of the pictures, they literally may not just have those available in that high of a resolution to print, like for a banner, for example, or something like that.
Right.
It's more advantageous to have vector-based files to do larger scale stuff.
Beth, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask the question. It's fine. It's probably easier.
Yes, please. So like, say I decided I wanted to do something like huge, like if I was going to do a design for somebody with a huge printer, but if I'm designing in Photoshop, do I save it from Photoshop? I think I could save it as an SVG and then work from there. You
can, but ultimately, like Photoshop itself is a pixel-based program. So even though you save it as a SVG, it's still really exporting as pixels. And so that's one, I don't know the best way or word for it, misnomer almost, in terms of these file types. So just because a file is saved as an SVG, just because it has vector shapes, doesn't necessarily mean what's inside of it is vector-based. So for example, I can take, let me see, this file, which is just a picture, this is just a JPEG of, I can create a new document. I'll paste that in. So ultimately, this is still just a JPEG that's in here. Like I said, so when I zoom in, you kind of see the pixelation, right? But I can export this as any file type, and I can say it's an AI file, or I can say it's an SVG file. I know where it's at. It's in here somewhere. Here, right? So I can save that as an SVG file. Ultimately, that's just a container, but it doesn't necessarily mean what's inside that container is an actual vector file, unfortunately.
Okay, so here's a dumb question. So like when I go and do something in Photoshop, I bring it into my shortcuts a lot to make it an SVG, and then pull it back in to use it, say.
So in that case, a lot of times what Silhouette will do a lot of times, and I'm assuming shortcuts a lot will also, when it brings those PNGs in, it basically does an auto trace on that file to convert that to a vector type file. So essentially it's going here to an actual trace.
So that was my next question. So if I do that and do that trace thing, then I should be good as an SVG from that point on?
You should. It just depends on the quality of the trace itself.
Show her how to do it with the clipping. So Marvin, show her the difference between a quick trace and a clipping art trace, and show her what happens, because people don't understand what happens when you do just a quick trace of that. So do a quick trace and then show the clip art trace of the same image, and you're going to see how it picks up some details and some are more detailed.
So this is now a traced image, and you can definitely see, I noticed a second ago, when it converts this to a vector file, even though so it tries to take, in terms of the vector file, every color, for example, or shade and piece, and tries to turn it into objects. And so like I can break this group apart that's here in my objects panel, and you see all these individual layers now that make up this file that like Nicky said, this was the quick trace. And so I can grab that square and discolor it and whatnot. But the big thing when you do tracing, because it tries to break this down into these vector objects, is, for example, on the gradient, this is a nice smooth gradient across, where here you don't get that, especially in the quick trace.
Right.
Some of the other ones you can, but any of the gradient type stuff typically is a lot better in a actual pixel based file. And that's, you know, just kind of one of the trade-offs between the two, where a lot of times the vector based shapes and objects are better as spot colors or single colors anyways.
Can you also now show what it looks like as the clip art? Because there's different, so in that tracing, when he does the trace, right? If you go into the list and you go into the outline trace,
Yeah,
there's different ones that you could do. So it's like more detailed quality when it comes to tracing something, but it also means a lot more pieces. If you go to the high quality one, you'll see there's lots of little tiny pieces in there.
Yeah, and so exactly, and when it goes to do this tracing or gives you the options here, you can adjust the sliders here for detail smoothing and the corners themselves, excuse me. And down at the bottom, you'll see it shows out of this file, there's 36 individual curves. That's like your actual objects, the individual pieces that it's going to break this down into. The nodes I can get into later, but that's basically points that are editable around the curves. And then it's saying this right here is actually 6 colors. Now there is a tab for colors, for example, and you can end up editing these or kind of merging some together, for example, or you can just specify, hey, this is, I know in this one, it's hard because it's a gradient file, but say if I could recognize that there was, 12 colors or something, you can literally type that in and it'll resample the file itself and try to run it off of that, or it's not doing it on more, but it'll do it on less if I do 3. And so it just did these 3 now. And so I'd lose some of that gradient by doing that.
Right.
But there's different options there, like I said, in terms of.
So which one do you suggest that's most used?
I typically, for what I do, is usually use this clip art trace. And like for using it, and I use Corel mostly for my Roland work more so than I do sublimation. I do still use it some for sublimation type stuff, but for me, I do it more for the Roland itself. And the reason that I do tracing is more so if I have a logo file, for example, that somebody sends over that they want as stickers, and I need to actually contour cut around it. I have to do a trace to actually give me the curves around the shape of their logo. And so I'll do the trace, but then after the trace, I basically have my cut line left around their PNG because the coloring is better there. So then at that point, I'm kind of merging between vector objects and the PNG because it has a higher quality for printing in terms of the coloration.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question because I know I'm taking it up, but since we're on the subject, so like if I was to take something off the internet and get a picture off the internet, I could still do that in here and it would still wind up being an SVG if I do that, or?
If you do the trace, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. So yeah, so that kind of at least shows the difference of there in terms of the files themselves between your JPEG, your raster type images, and the vector based objects. And really, like I was mentioning kind of at the beginning, I don't want to like gloss over, but Corel Draw itself is primarily a vector-based program, and kind of its competitors, if you will, are the Adobe Illustrators, your Inkscape, Affinity Design or Designer. Those are all vector-based programs primarily. And then the raster type, your photo editing programs, your Photoshop, GIMP is an open source free one. Corel actually has, I think it's called Paint Shop.
Yep.
What it is.
Yeah,
and so those are more of your pixel-based editors.
Yep.
Yeah. So from there, I'll kind of go into tools. And so I kind of got this guy. And Nikki, I know you went over pretty much.
Nope, go ahead.
Naming them. Your pick tool itself is literally just like your selection tool of which you want to edit. And so once you have something selected, I guess before I mention that to you, I'll say, as you go through and use different tools, typically this bar at the top has different options based on what tool you have selected. So there may be some cases where if like you're reading through a tutorial or something else, that you may get different results than what it's telling you. And a lot of times it's because there's a setting in this bar that is different, or set different. So definitely check that. But the pick tool is just your basic like selection type tool.
You can actually change that. I believe you can change your pick tool too up at the top where the arrow is.
Yeah, I know there's the freehand pick and freehand. I've never actually used any of those. I don't know if you have, if you can talk.
No, I was talking about up top on that toolbar you were just talking about, and it shows the over that one, over one more.
Here?
Yeah. Oh no, that's your basic shapes. That's for your basic shapes there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Mine's not there.
Yep.
It's so weird because mine's not there. Okay,
right.
go
ahead. So kind of from there, this flat menu, and similar to Photoshop, and I think a lot of the programs, when they have this like little, I don't know how it's coming across for you guys, but a lot of times there's a little shaded like corner of the tools, and basically that usually means that there's nested tools up underneath. And
I call it the flyout tool. It's a flyout. Yep.
So the shape tool, for example, where we did the trace while ago and it showed the nodes, what that ends up doing is allowing you to go in. So when I have a shape selected and then go to the shape tool, it's still an arrow here. A lot of times, for example, I'll show this, like if you do a rectangle, this in terms of my layers is still coming across as a rectangle, and it doesn't allow me, for whatever reason, it's just the way that Corel is, it won't let me pick the individual nodes unless I actually convert this to a curve file and basically break it out of that rectangle shape. But once I do that, I can go to the shape tool and then grab the individual nodes and basically edit that into other shapes and modify it. Kids being loud back there, is that distracting?
Oh, is that what they're doing? It's fine.
Yes.
I thought I was like, I don't know who that is. Terry, to answer your questions, while there's a quick pause there, since it's a gradient, she says, is that the reason why the vector doesn't look so sharp?
It can and can't. So gradients, usually as long as they're created in here, and I will go over, I have a thing down here where I can do gradients and show that a little bit. Usually they're just as good gradients in Corel as they are in Photoshop. They're just different to actually create them. And so some of the features to create may be limited here versus Photoshop, or there's just difference in how to actually do them. So in that
this was jagged.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, you mean when he did the tracing part of it?
Yeah.
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 Well,
that wasn't smooth. It was all jagged.
Exactly, because it's trying to pick up all the different colors. Because remember, in a gradient, you're going from like a dark to a light, for an example, and it's trying to pick up every single color it possibly can. Well, it doesn't always pick it up smoothly. It creates it into a pixel form, I guess, is the best way to.
Yeah, and a lot of that too is because when I did the trace, it's trying to convert, it's trying to basically discern where there's some tolerance difference in the color to convert that and say, okay, well, this is a shape. And so it's trying to bound those different colors into physical shapes. So when you trace something that has a gradient, that's really a bad way to do gradients, really. It's not a good way to deal with gradients, to be honest. If you're doing, like I said, the individual type colors, like where it trace, this portions of the objects, that usually comes across really well when you trace, but gradients in terms of tracing is difficult to do. You can actually make, and these gradients here were made in here in Corel Draw. And I'll show how to do that in a minute. And when you do that, they come across fine. So, I mean, they don't have that jaggedness here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So in terms of the actual shape tool, though, when I have this selected, you can basically edit the individual points here to do different things with the shape. When you convert these, say to, I just right clicked on the dot there and have convert these to different types of points, then you can go in and edit and make them more curved. And well, I don't know why that's not letting me turn it.
Because it doesn't want you to play.
Right. and, you know, create different shapes and that sort of thing. And that's where ultimately under the actual shape tool itself to allow you to then edit the individual nodes of a particular shape. Also within here that I use pretty often is the smooth tool. The smooth tool. So this was just a black and white. It was part of a logo file. I just cut some of it off. But often when you trace text is a similar thing where text may not necessarily come across extremely smooth either. A lot of times I recommend if you're going to be printing text, at least big anyways, you know, again, the tracing itself, it does the best that it can in deciding where that edge is. But obviously sometimes it's not perfect and you get kind of the jagged, you know, lines there. So this smooth tool allows you to kind of help with that. Within, again, kind of the options bar, this allows you to change the size of this bubble. And so if I'm going to try to get, say, into this point here of the E, I may want to make that smaller so it's not also covering up this top curve, you know, as well. But ultimately, you basically use this like a paintbrush. Actually click on that shape and you just paint over that
Show
bump.
them what would happen in the corner if it being that big.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as I'm drawing here, for example, it could also be hitting this other side and affect it because of the size of it. In this case, it probably didn't really make too much of a difference. But that's maybe.
So all that does is kind of take some of the nodes out and makes it smoother.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
So you kind of paintbrush around to smooth things out with the smooth tool. So that's,
But it's still an SVG.
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just smooths out that SVG for you.
Yeah, so it really just smooths those lines.
Yep.
Right? So that's a helpful one for sure. Pick tool shape. So the crop and knife tool, I don't know, Nikki, do you have a preference when you, so this is a JPEG file that, you know, has all these different logos on it. Do you use both or either crop or knife
I
tool?
love my knife tool, and just because it's so much easier for me to use.
I do
than
as well.
cropping.
Yep, I do as well. And I'll show why. So the crop tool itself, because I'll do this first because I'll undo afterwards. If you use the crop tool and say I just want this logo here, it's fine to, you're saying, okay, this is the one I want, and I crop. The problem is it loses everything else of that file, cuts everything else out, which that may be what you want. But in this case,
Maybe I wanted all of them.
yeah, all of them, right?
I wanted all of them.
So that's where the knife tool is a little better for that. And that basically you start from the outside of your shape and just draw across. And that is now cut. Ooh, I have to break it apart.
No, you have to go outside. Click on the out dead space.
There we go. Okay. I thought
You
I
like
did.
that? You knew exactly what I was talking about. Click in the dead space, Marvin.
I must not have clicked. I thought I did, but I must not have clicked on it today. But so those are now separated with the knife. And so then you can do the same thing.
Which you could then take that T. John Eatery if you needed to and trace bitmap on that and turn it into an SVG.
Yes. Yep. Good point. Let's see if that allowed it to cut all of them. Yeah. So now they're all individual. So that's what the knife tool is for. And at least showing the limitation of the crop, like I said, where, you know, maybe you want it, you don't care about the rest of it. But in this case, like if I was going to try to do stickers or, you know, something else with all of these, I don't want to have to keep importing that file over and over and over if I know I can just use the knife tool.
So then those are now individual files?
Yep.
Yeah, individual layers, each
Yep.
one of
That's what I
these.
meant. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Really, I don't use the eraser. I haven't. I don't know, Nikki, if you want to talk about or if you've used this virtual.
I do use the eraser. Sometimes, like for instance, use your go onto your smooth thing, go on your image for smooth, and use the eraser tool. Just so that,
Here.
yeah, and then just go over to your eraser. And basically, if you just wanted to crop something out, that's just the easiest. I love that tool with every inch of my life. So,
Yeah.
and again, you can change the size of that. Like he said, once you click on the tool, you can
Right.
change the thickness of it up top. You can actually also change it from a circle to a square, because sometimes you don't want any. Yep. So that will do like a quick line. So if you go down on the left-hand side of that smooth tool and you start at the top and go to the bottom or wherever. Yep.
Right.
Now drag it up. Now you can do it as one quick delete. And that helps when you're trying to eliminate. But I like the fact that it has a square option, because sometimes I don't want a rounded curve. I really want it to be smooth and straight across. And I love the fact that I can click and drag and make it a longer erase instead of trying to do it individually. How many times have we tried to do something individually and we end up with those little tiny, like little divot marks, right? And you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted. Well, that's where that comes into play.
Yep.
And that's why I like that one.
Yep, absolutely. And this menu, the pen tool is probably the only one of these that I use. I don't know if you use any of these other ones.
No.
The pen tool is essentially similar to what I did here in terms of the shape tool to manipulate, but the pen allows you to actually draw your own shapes. And so I'm just clicking straight lines and just clicking dots at this point. But once you start to actually, if I hold down the click and drag, then it draws out the curve.
Yep. So if you click, you create stop points, but if you click and drag, you can create curve points.
And then it's going to do all that. So in terms of that, some of the times I don't have a good example here. I'll just use this. Say if we wanted to just go around something though.
You want to create your own, you know, outside edge contour, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's go quick now, but kind of get the idea to kind of trace around different shapes. And then once you close that path, then that makes it a full shape then. And then this shape can then be colored in.
Yep.
And you can go back to all your fill tools.
Terry asks, what's the difference between the pen tool and the bezier tool?
The
I'm
pen
sorry,
tool, which
what?
one? This one?
The pen tool and the what tool, Terry? Hold on.
It's this one. It's the bezier.
Oh,
The Bezier.
Easier. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know the differences. They're very similar in that aspect of, I mean, I'm doing the same thing now and I have the other tool.
Yeah.
So I'm really not sure in terms of the differences and why you couldn't use one over the other. I don't know if it's how that it reacts to go around certain shapes or curves that it does something different. I don't use it a lot to be able to answer that, unfortunately. The main thing I use the pen tool for, Nikki, is, you know, when you see those crop lines that I do all the time and you're like, why don't you just do a box?
because I do it all.
Right. So that's where I use the pen tool, and I'll literally just make these. And then that's what I'll print around objects and stuff. And then I use these as essentially like cut marks when I use my like guillotine cutter.
No, remember me? This is Charlie. You talked at Charlie.
Sorry, I muted Terry.
Nope, all good. This one is pretty cool. So I'm not a drawer or sketcher, but this artistic media, or the live sketch, I believe is the one I'm really meaning to. If there are tablet type devices you can connect to Corel. I have one here. I don't know if you guys can see me because I know I'm sharing my screen. But where did that disappear?
Yeah, you can't even see it. You got to put it right in front of your shirt, buddy. There you go.
So this guy comes with a pen, and I can literally draw on here, and it's connected just like a mouse would be. So it's like an iPad in a way, but without the screen. So you can literally use your computer for it though. And with this live sketch type deal, you can do it with a mouse as well.
Yep.
But it allows you to, as you sketch stuff out, it converts these over time. And there's adjustments with the timing here and the different settings to actually then convert these into actual vector lines as you sketch. And I'm not really a drawer, but I know it's there.
There's a lot of tools in Corel that we don't use because of the, what we use them for.
Right, yeah,
functions.
exactly.
But can you design into it? Yes, you can. You
Right.
can. That's where I started. You can actually design in Corel. You don't necessarily need Photoshop, although there's a lot more fun toys over in Photoshop.
Right.
But you can design in Corel.
Yep, absolutely. The shapes, I know we talked about the individual, the rectangle, circles, basic stuff. The main thing kind of with these that I'll mention is as you, and this is the same stuff, I think in almost all the vector programs is pretty standard, but the interaction between shapes, when you're picking multiple shapes, you get the different options here of how you combine and weld those together to interact with those, and cut them apart and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how those work with different shapes. And if you want to actually cut something out, for example, let's make this a color and this a different color. But really, like if I want to knock out the circle from the center of the rectangle here, if you use the combine option, then it does that. So that's actually transparent now.
You just blew Patty's mind. I can hear it, and she hasn't said a word. She hasn't said a word, but I can hear it. I can hear it over her screen.
Yeah, so those are obviously just the shapes and then the different combine options that are there. I will say too, I use this boundary one a lot. That's at the end. I know that I have a good, maybe if I select all these.
Yep.
So the boundary, if you're selecting a lot of different things and essentially want to have a separate line that goes around the outside, say the perimeter of everything that's selected. If you click boundary, then it does exactly that. I'll just drag it out here. So it went around the outside.
Okay, Marvin, can you go slower where you're pointing your cursor? Because like my eyes are blowing me up and I want to watch.
Yep,
Is
and
there
this is
anything-
recorded too, so that you'll be able to go back and watch it.
Is there any of that I just went over that you want me to repeat and do slower? All of?
Okay. Well,
That
go
whole
back
little
to
bit.
Go back
Okay.
to the shapes. You want to go back to
Yep.
shapes? Okay, so go back to shapes, Marvin.
Yep. So the individual shapes, when you have, it's really when you have multiple shapes selected, that it gives you here at the top these series of different combine options. And they're also here under object and shaping. These are the same ones that are actually kind of spelled out here. Honestly, I can never remember, except for weld, boundary, and combine, which is not, combine is here and not in that list. Those are the only three that I can typically remember exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to interact with objects. The other one's kind of here in the middle. Usually I have to click each one and undo and click and undo and click and undo to get, if I'm trying to do
Okay,
something.
can I just ask one question?
Yep.
What was the difference when you did them all, you said, for the boundary? What's the difference between that and doing a contour then? When you did the pirates, the contour, yeah, that whole thing.
All of this. So you can do a contour. So the contour itself though is going to go outside of all of that. And it's going to add an additional space around it. The boundary literally traces that edge and doesn't add any addition to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, got it.
Yep. So like I just showed at least the welding portion though. So weld, right, it just combines those two into one shape. And then I'll show that when they're overlapped again and you select both, and if you do the combine, what that does is knocks out the center. So if I do combine, then it does exactly that. And then, yeah, I just mentioned the boundary of going around, and boundary does the exact perimeter of all that you have selected. Good transition from here, Beth, to the contour that I've got spelled out down here. So the contour is kind of like a stroke around that, and it adds an additional space around. So if we go down here to contour, and I'll get back to shadow here in a second and do also some enveloping as well. But the contour essentially will add a stroke. So there's a couple of options here in the toolbar again. There's the inside contour, which is ultimately going to put it inside of the shape. This one is the outside contours. I was going to do the outside. This step is how many levels that you want outside. I can show that also in a second. And then this is the distance of how far you want that contour to be outside of here. So I'll just leave it as is for now. And I'm just going to click on the outside contour option, and it draws that around here. Now, as it's still connected as the actual contour and my layers, I can still edit this and adjust it smaller or larger. And then the other is this guy over here in terms of the corners and how it's going to treat those corners. So right now it's set on mitered. And so the actual corner is very squared as opposed to rounded or beveled. And so there's those options there as well. And then you do get the coloring option. So I can change like the outline color of what it is now. A lot of times I don't necessarily do this often. Usually, like, again, kind of going back to my use with the decal type stuff, I'll do a contour to get this line that goes around something. And then I actually will then break this apart from that graphic, and I have to change that color to the specific cut contour color for our roll-in to read that as an actual cut line. But as is, you can go up here and change the shading and stuff like that of.
Okay, so I have another question then for what you just said. You said that you would go in there and then change it for your rolling.
Correct.
So how come you can't do that clipboard, less detailed trace to get to the same point that you were just trying to get to with this?
I do. So a lot of times,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of times. So example, and this is a bad example just because it's a basic circle, but say if this was a more complicated shape, I did the trace, and this again was, imagine a more complicated shape, sorry. And then, but I want to go around this. I don't necessarily want to cut right on this edge, but say I want to add some white space here so that like when it's on, darker glass, that it, shows up a little better. So if this was that's that full group, let's see if I actually add a contour to this. I think what it's going to do here, because I'm also have all these other shapes, it's probably going to add some stuff inside. Let's see. Nope. Or if it is, it's all underneath, but it looks like it just added that space. So that should be good there. And then what I would do is break this apart. So I have, that's the specific contour here. And again, kind of for our roll-ins, we need this color, the cut contour line, that color. Is that kind of what you're asking to help?
Yeah, because I do the detail, the trace thing.
Yep.
And then I take out the details so that I just have the circle, and then I could just either make my line a little bit bigger or smaller.
Right. Yep.
It just makes it easier because it's just a regular shape.
Exactly. And what
You teach me well.
And what I would end up doing here, because we kind of talked about earlier, the quality here is not good in terms of the shading. What I'll say kind of messed up in this, opposed to what I would typically do, is I leave that traced right over the top of this version, and then I would delete all this other stuff out. And really I'm printing this and I'm deleting this. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'd actually do that. But the reason for the trace, and again, in this case, it's just a basic circle, so you don't get as good of an idea here. But if that was a more complicated shape, the main thing with the trace is to get that outside edge, convert it to what you need to do the cut line for, and then, but you really want to print this JPEG or PNG, but you're just trying to do the trace so you actually get that outline that goes around your object. So that touched on at least the contour here. Let me do shadow real quick. So shadow is also in this menu, I think. Oh, must be in.
Yep, it's up at the top. There you go.
Very first one. Goodness.
Yep, there you go. I got you.
Thank you.
And this could be a tricky tool when you're first learning it.
Yep,
You will
absolutely.
fight with it first before you get it, and then all of a sudden it just clicks.
Yeah. So I just did. So when I click the shadow, I have the text selected, and I just click and drag this arrow, and you can literally just like move this around. And you, I mean, you can get extreme with it of where it's at. Let me do that. That's literally changing the shape of. Try to make it look a little more realistic, and then you can actually play with like the actual opacity, basically going from the black here to the white. What are you gonna say?
And you can even go to the top and change the color of your shadow too.
Yep.
So if you go
You
up
can-
at the top, remember how Marvin said there's tools up at the top. So up at the top, you can change it to a different color, and you can even change it from multiply to normal. So if you put, so right now it's blending it with the white background. If you put it on normal, depending on the color it is and the intensity and all of that, you can play with all of those type of things when it comes to your, can you go back into that menu for quick? You can play with a color saturation. You can just do some kind of cool things with it, even in the shadowing. So it doesn't have to always be black. You can make your shadow any color, and you can put it on anything really, as long as there's it's a PNG or it's a vector file. You can't put it on a PNG. You have to trace it first in order to get that shadow. It won't do it, but I know.
Nope. Yeah, absolutely. Good point there. And so like I can try to show that on this one. So this is still the JPEG, right? So it has the whole square. And if you try to do a shadow on that, what it does the whole square.
Right. So like I said, so it's not going to come as, you know, as clear as you want. So it could probably do it on a PNG. So, but it's still, if you've got any weird wonkiness, that's what you're going to get. So just
Yep.
keep that in mind when you're doing shadowing.
Yep, absolutely. Enveloping. So there is under, I'll get rid of this guy.
It's over where your shadow is.
Yeah, I'm trying to, so I've got the like bar up here. I was trying to show where the actual dockers for enveloping is. So I do it a lot of times. I actually have the envelope, I think it's under effects, and there's an actual envelope docker. And so I thought it was, here it is. So,
Bottom. Yeah.
So of that docker, say I can, there's a series, a whole bunch of different shapes you can end up doing. I won't go crazy with showing all of them.
Go crazy. This is what I want to learn. Go crazy. Go crazy.
So what's neat though, in the different, just the standard ones that are down here, like the single arc, for example. So I'll click that and then click add new. I don't know why they do them this way, but this is how I found to use it. So I go down to click this first and then go back to click add new. And this box changes here. And basically you can just grab these points now and curve them and curve your text. Or do different enveloping, if you will. Now you can also hold down the shift key as you drag, and it makes the opposite side go in, I guess, the same direction, if you will. No, opposite direction, right? If you do the control key, they follow each other. So you're going to get some art text.
Okay, I'm going to ask
You
another
also
question.
know, oh, sorry.
Can I?
Go for it.
So if you were to do the envelope tool,
Mhm,
thank you, like you bubbled it up or whatever you just did,
mhm.
and then you change the word enveloping to the word sometimes, it
Yep.
should be exact like it was with enveloping, correct?
Yes. Yep. And so that's part of the stuff you may have seen prior in like the rhinestone world, for example. I think they have some stuff where it's very similar to this. It's just within our type stuff though. But yeah, exactly. So if I change it to be like this, something like that. I think the text editing may be a little bit different. Yeah. So it brings up this box that it makes you edit in. But yeah, you can change this to that and click OK. That's not a good one because it's not as long.
But an amazing.
Wait, where did you get that edit box from?
I just clicked on the text itself.
Okay.
So
Now,
when
go
it's enveloped, yeah, I just clicked here. You see it has the text tool, and then it just brings that up.
Wait, I missed it again. It's my eyes. I'm sorry.
All right, no, you're good. So when I have, so it's already enveloped here. I'm just using the pick tool to select it, and I don't even have to do that, to be honest. I just went to the text tool. Is really, I think that's all I have to do. If I click over here, it's going to start a new box. It has the plus and all there. But if I go over the text, it changes to the cursor. And then just click, and then it brings that up to
you got to actually click on the text that you want to change,
Yep.
and then the box will appear. Now, could you please go back to the envelope tool, just so I want to show them something too?
Mhm.
So that it has the nodes showing, so you can edit it. I want you to be able to edit. Okay, so if you click on that dot, you can go to the right or the left too.
Yes.
So on those, yep, so you can change, there's different ones and you can change it. So just know that you can manipulate your box. It doesn't have to just necessarily go up and down. You can go across as well.
Yep.
Whatever it may be. Now show them a different
Shape.
show them a different shape.
Yeah, I hadn't. Right. So you can
Some
click
of them
on.
are just weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right. But yes, so like what Beth was asking, if you wanted to go in, you wanted to keep that particular thing in there, you can go in and change the name in and out, and it won't change the length of it. It'll just fit. I mean, it will change the length because Beth is small. You want, but if you have the same amount of words, it should arch it the same way. Is basically, I should state that correctly. It'll arch it the same way. But please note, if you have a big word, like envelope, and then you try to put the word Beth in there, it's not going to look the same. It's not going to stretch it to fit. It's going to just fit with the basic letters, I guess is the way to call it. So now if you were to change that, change that to a small word and it'll show you. So that's the crazy thing that he made, right? So now you see how it has a lot of letters. So now just type in the word, just type in Marvin. Marvin's even just shorter than that. See, and then it changes it. So while it's still warped in the way or enveloped in the way that we made it, because there's less letters, it's gonna still change differently. It still fits in within the confines, I guess.
And I think, was it Patty who mentioned in the comments about both curving? What was it?
Warping text.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how I did this in the picture that I shared there in the group anyway. So I did an envelope to it to kind of get that warped look. And then I just went afterwards and then added a shadow. Good job in here, but
Because you're blurry right now.
yeah, really. But you can combine effects as well, ultimately.
And there's also up in the presets. So you can actually hit some of those presets and it'll show you too. And it'll set it for you already so that maybe you're not good at it and you want to, that's how it'll do it too in the presets.
Yep.
Yes, Miss Shalata. Shalata has a question.
Yeah, you know how I asked about making the lettering so it circles
Yes.
or follows the path around your
yes.
design on the outside, creates like a,
Path. Yep.
yeah, can you show us how to do that on here on the Corel?
Absolutely.
And I did find out how to do it in Photoshop too, Shalata, and I will show you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
So if we have this as our curve, and so we want to arc it around this, which there's, and you can just type out whatever your text is. That's how I do it anyway. There may be other ways. I just go up to text and then fit text to path.
Yep.
And what it does, it gives you this weird looking arrow here, and you just click on the path or get to the path that you want it on, and it shows you how it's going to look on there. And then basically once I click, it's going to put it there.
So will you put it on the bottom for me for a second? Okay, now put it there. Now you should have it to where you can change. Okay, yep, up there. So let's say it's
Like
backwards.
flip horizontal
Yep.
or something
Yep.
to make it where you
Yep.
can read it.
And now you can actually drag it inside the circle as well. You can move it so you can change it. You can flip it to make it fit however you need it to flip. Now, how do you get I know the shortcut key, but once it's on the path, you got to get it off the path. So that's another thing. Once it's there, because now they're attached. If he goes to move that oval, it moves it as one piece. So how do you get that off of there? I know the shortcut key. So
So I use shortcut key too, and it's probably the same one. I use Control K.
yep, Control K. Okay.
And
I
so-
actually made my own shortcut key for my power clipping key because, why not? You can even make your own shortcut keys in Corel, which is a nice feature, which we can get into a later time and how to do it. But you can create your own shortcut keys, especially if it's for a tool that you are going to use a lot and you just don't want to have to constantly pick down in the drop-down menu. There's options for allowing for you to pick a new shortcut key. So like, for example, I explained to you that Jody did not have the common shapes because she has an older version of Corel. And for some reason, her Corel does not have it. But if we looked it up, we could find it. So we made a shortcut key, just labeled it CS. And when she typed CS, it became a shortcut key. Will you please show them what P does? That is a shortcut.
Can I ask just one stupid question first?
Hold, please. Hold, please. I have put Patty first. So if you want to center something on your canvas space, if he hits P, just the letter P.
Let me do it on. Let me do it on this one.
Okay.
So as I have stuff off of the canvas, and there's a couple of different ones. The P is the only one that I can remember, but P centers whatever your graphic is on the middle of your canvas. So if I just hit the letter P, it centers it on that page.
Patty, you had your hand up first. Can I please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, my question was, well, it was back when Marvin was just doing the text to path, and you mentioned getting rid of the text to path. Okay, I didn't realize you could actually get rid of the object. I just make it invisible.
Yep. So write down Control K, and that gets it so it pulls it off of your path. So now they're two separate things.
But does that mean, okay, so does that mean if I pull it off the path, that if I actually change the shape that it was originally attached to, that it's not gonna match that? So if I started out, let's say, with an oval ornament, and I'm gonna instead move it to a circle, and I had it just fine on the oval, if I take it to the circle, is it no longer gonna work?
Well, not necessarily, probably not, because remember the two different shapes and you're creating the shape to it. And that'll change for the word. Like if you want to type it in and out, it'll stay. Can you go ahead and unclick it, Marvin, do the Control K, and then change the letters of the word pirate to something different for me? Nope, not that.
Sorry.
Do it
Yeah.
again.
I don't know why it's doing that.
Is it off the path?
Yeah, so here it's separated. And then I'm clicking the text tool, which it's putting my cursor over there.
Delete it. You see what happens?
Right.
So with the text to path, it doesn't work necessarily for changing out. That's where the envelope tool is going to be a better option. And that's what I found with that, trying to fix it and put it in the same, it goes crazy. Now, if he were to back it up, and you can sometimes back it up, and I think it's just being wonky right now, and you can change the letters to be, it will fix it to that. But if you know, it can go wonky, so just be careful when you're doing it. But to go from a different shape to a different shape, you're going to have to create a new path.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and that's what I did here. So I just did undo until I got back to where it was on the path instead of ungrouped, and then I edited it here. Is the only way that I was able to do that.
Okay, so Beth had a question, and then Shalata did have her hand raised at one point.
Yeah, I don't know how to find that hand raise thing. Otherwise, I'd be raising my hand. So no, I don't have that. I looked everywhere.
It's in reactions at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Continue.
So where your eagles is with the path. So now if I would go to change the text, because the path is still there, I should be able to change the text and follow the same path, correct? So can I hide that shape but keep the word so that I can continually change it?
So I believe
So that it would match the same path, but just a different word?
Yep. So this shape, the ellipse here that's in my layers, I can make that transparent, and so you don't see it. Yeah.
But you should be able to change it without it actually being attached to the path.
Change
Well,
the
how is that possible if you're changing all the different words? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters there. If I wanted to do like the high school or something going around it, you just
So
keep
go
changing the
ahead.
high school.
Hold on one second. So separate the two paths. And then I want you to pull the eagles off the top and just change that to the word amazing. Because it's
That's
going
what I was trying to do earlier. So when I tried to so I just highlighted all of that and do,
I don't know why it's highlighted.
yeah, I don't know why mine is either. So I don't know if that's an issue with mine right now, a bug or what.
What if you, I've never had that problem.
But if I leave mine attached,
You're changing it.
yeah, it changes fine.
It still follows the path. I'm going to check it over on mine and see why it's not working, because I know it works on mine.
Yeah.
Now you're going to make me go look. All right.
And to be honest, I had planned to actually restart my computer before doing this. To try to do any of this stuff, like to flush out any bug. My computer's probably been on for like 3 weeks at this point. I barely ever turn it off or shut it down.
So
restart.
basically this text to path is working exactly the same way as Photoshop.
I don't know that.
Because that's kind of how I do it in Photoshop.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, Beth, to answer your question.
So at least a couple of other things I want to show here. One of the things,
Before you
go
do
ahead.
one quick thing,
Yep.
Shaletta, did you still have your question? You did have your hand raised. Did we answer your question?
Oh, no, I had meant to put my hand down and accidentally put my hand up again.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't want to miss you, hon. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so a couple of things on text, and I really like this. Well, two things. One, if you have text selected and go to your shape tool, it gives you these weird buttons almost. I don't know what you call it, icons. That allows you to change your kerning, like in between the letters easily, so you can just drag out.
And that's great for if you've got those crazy fonts that don't exactly, especially for script fonts that don't exactly meld together nicely and you really want them to kind of flow. That tool is great.
If you have multiple lines, it allows you to change the line spacing here. I just have the one. And then the other thing I was going to show that I like a lot for sports stuff specifically is the contour. Can somebody give me like team colors, 2 team colors real quick?
Blue and gold.
Blue and gold. Okay. So with that selected, I'm going to go up to a 2-step contour, and it's going to look weird now. And I'm going to break this apart and then do something with this ultimately. Is kind of the look that I like going for. And I'll show why in a second. So in terms of the spacing, really what I'm looking for here, one with this font, I kind of like it with the mitered corners anyways. And then that spacing is fine. I could probably go a little bit smaller. It's fine, something like that. You know, adjust to your liking. What I'm gonna do here is now break this apart with the Control K. And also, if you forget that shortcut, because a lot of people do, under Object, it's here under Break Apart, Break Contour Apart, and it shows shortcut Control K. And it's just giving you saying that the spot colors themselves will be converted to groups of objects. I should probably turn that off, but so now I have these 2 separate groups of objects here that are those 2 outlines, the 2 contours here, and then I'm going to also ungroup those. It's Control U to ungroup, or you can right click on and go to ungroup. And so ultimately, I've kind of broken all this stuff apart now. I'll stay together there. And so if I change though my text, my original text to a blue, and then pick this middle one, and I'll go with a white, and the outside one, I don't know if I have a good gold, probably not. It's more of a brown. It's gold. You get this kind of look.
Wrong gold, but okay.
It said gold.
Yeah.
But you know, that's kind of a way to get multiple colors within a single design and kind of have that step type look to incorporate multiple colors.
And you should be actually able to do a shadow on that white.
On the white?
Yep.
Let's do it. Do I do a preset?
Do whatever you want. Live dangerously. So you could have a weird shadow on there. You can have fun with it. This is where it allows some artistic creativity, where you could have it slightly off on that white. So he could have it just slightly over the edge of that white to where it's not like it is right now, because that's kind of weird. That's not what I meant, but you know, but you can even add shadowing to different layers. So it could be a shadow in one direction and a shadow in a different direction, depending on the artistic look you're looking for. So again, there are lots of different things. And while he's in here, he might as well go over gradient.
Yes.
Gradient's fun. But this now makes it, you see how if he changes the color of that, now there's a shadow there. Now it's going to look like it's a popped off of that, off of the white. So again, it adds another dimension when you are doing designing. Question regarding this before gradient. Yes, Beth. Oh, and I see Patty also
Okay.
has a question.
So here's my question, and I think this actually worked out perfect to what my question is going to be. When I type in varsity letters and I use the W in the middle of the word, it kind of throws the spacing off. So if you look at the T and the A, it kind of looks funky now, even though it's perfect because of spacing, it still looks funky that you kind of want to almost drag it in. With that little kerning thing, can you just move 3 letters of that over? Or do you have to do the whole word?
I think you can do,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I didn't do this in that
I
font.
see your hand raised too, Patty, so I don't know it.
So for example, you're trying to move an individual letter. I think it's these. Yeah. So that's letting me move 1 letter. And I can just move it over.
So you could move can you move the TES all together, or you have to do it individually?
Yeah, I think if you hold Control or Shift or one of the two, and then you just slide them over. You can use your arrow keys actually.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you.
Welcome. So yes, you can. Did you use Control or Shift? I can never remember.
I did Shift on that. I'll try
So
Control. So to
right.
speak.
So you click on those little tiny nodes. You hold down your Shift key, grab the letters you want, and you can use your arrow keys to slide them over without going up and down, because you know we all get wonky and we all have such a steady hand. And so this way it allows for you to move it over to create for that weird spacing Beth is talking about. Miss Patty, what was your question, hon?
Actually, mine was kind of related to that, which was with all the extra colors on it. And it made it really apparent, that color example, it made it really apparent that, you know, some of them are grouped closer together than others. So how would I would just use that kerning tool again and separate them and go back and do each one separately, or how would I break these apart now?
It would be, I would say probably easier to fix that first and then add your contour to it. The way I've done this one, all of these, I broke them all apart. So they're not connected anymore, unfortunately.
And you can actually break all of those even apart, so they're individual.
Right.
So if he groups them all back together, and you go ahead and yeah, you should be able to break them each individual one apart. Or is it create a curve or something? You should be able to break the word apart.
Yep. So of this one, I just Control K. Hang on. I think it's because I've got the drop shadow in here
Yeah.
also.
It's not letting you do it.
Let me get rid of that. Okay, so if this is just my text and I just break this apart, Control K, it broke all the letters.
Yep.
Here.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
now each one of these is separate. And then
yeah,
you
But
can
I
either-
would do that. You'd have to do that and then eventually go back and fix the gold so that like the gold isn't.
yeah, it's
right up
definitely
next to each
something you'll
other.
see, and you'll see it before you actually, you know, how he broke it apart.
Mhm.
In the very first step after he added the contours, that's when you're going to notice it, and that's the time to change it. So you take all the contours off again and then move it over, grab those 3, move it over, because you know there's going to be that weird gap at that point before you start breaking layers apart. I would do it before he did those steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I hope. Anybody?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
The other thing too, I mean, in terms of individual letters, like I showed earlier with the shape tools and all, where I like stamped out the center, that's essentially really what this is. Even though right now it's still an editable letter, but I can convert this to what's called a curve And that basically removes the editability. It's no longer a font, it's the actual shape now. But this I can also break apart, and it gives me that's the center of the R is separate. So there's some cases where you want to break different curves apart to get pieces in different locations or delete different stuff out, but you can always break those things down into the individual shapes and all once you start
And
doing
that's a difference between a vector program and a rasterized program, I think.
yeah, yep.
You're able to really get down to the nitty gritty of a font more, and in this case, a font.
Right. Yep.
All right, you want to move on to Docker, sir?
Yep. Oh, the last thing was the fill, the interactive fill, right? Oh,
Yeah, your gradient.
gradient. Yep. So I think it'll let me do it with the drop shadow, maybe. I'll just break it apart. So with the pirate selected, I think the interactive fill, if I just click and drag,
It's going to respond just like a drop shadow.
right? Yep. And you can get a gradient, and then you can play around with the bar here, and you can, you know, change the angle that you want it to. That's big right now. You can adjust it, you know, to your liking, that sort of thing, but you get the idea in terms of what that does with the gradient itself. And so this, in terms of printing though, it doesn't have that choppiness now, like I did earlier when I did the trace, right? I mean, that's a good clean gradient from the royal to
Before you go on to your next, before you go into Dockers, I want to talk to them about something too.
yeah. And one other thing too here, I guess I'll kind of mention, let me turn this back the other way real quick. So it's going across letters. This doesn't, ooh, sorry, I'm trying to actually turn this. There we go. You don't have to necessarily also be limited to the two colors. I believe if I double click on the line, not like that.
It's probably one of the trickier tools to use.
Yeah, let me see. There we go. So I added a color here. Oh, I just got rid of it on accident. You can add in additional colors along your path also.
Yep.
Yeah,
Kinda
you kind of play around with like where to actually click at.
But yeah, it's very finicky. Hashtag do it in Photoshop.
Right.
Right? That's where we're doing it.
So you can
Okay.
get as complex as you want with the gradient there.
So can you go to the, while we have this, let's play with this for a few minutes. Can you go to the effects tool, please, sir?
The menu.
Yeah. Okay, so in here, because I couldn't show it to you earlier, this is where you can get creative with designs. So if you go down and you go into the adjust, you should probably be clicking on something, sir. Okay. All right, this is where you can go into, let's say, your hue and saturation. So this is a great opportunity. Let's say you wanted to click on that. You can go in and change the colors of things. Okay, that's where you're going to be, you know, you can change that. You can move your slide bars on the bottom. There you go. See? And now you can change the gradient that you just made. All right, so that's pretty cool. So there's that. You can also go up in there.
Can we cancel this?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Now, if you click on each one, I'm going to talk about different things in each one. So in this particular one, you can make things look like a watercolor. You can make it look like waved paper, pastels. There's lots of different things that you can actually do. There's the Gaussian blur. If you go to the Gaussian blur on that one, that's a fun one. So you can change the effect of something. So by moving the slide bar, you can change how blurry something gets. Especially when you're trying to like blur out an image for a background and you want the kind of the colors, but that's how, so now if you notice it had a definite artist effect to it. Okay, it's just really cool what you can do with it, right? And you just keep playing with it. If you go back up, yep, we're going to talk about each. If you go back to the adjustments, there's different ones I want to just talk to you about. Go down to the next one, please, Marvin. So you can make it a charcoal, you can use a crayon, different things. So as he keeps going down,
watercolor.
Yep. you can make something turn into a watercolor again by picking your brush size. It might not show up on this, but you'll notice it more on like an image, you know, that you bring in. You can change the image to a watercolor and whatnot. You can actually make it into a mosaic too. And one of the effects up at the top, you can actually change your image into a mosaic. So that effect's in there, and he'll go ahead and cancel. There's just different things. So don't be afraid to look what the effects tools have in here, because they can add some pretty cool, like you can make it into stained glass is my favorite. If you go up into the creative, yeah, go to stained glass. It's in your, and it's like, where'd it go? Okay. So it's going to start creating, and you'll notice it, and it puts the lines in there for you to create the stained glass look. There you go. You're welcome. That's been a great tutorial. Now we can, no, I'm kidding. But that's what you can do, and you can change the colors and whatnot. So that's kind of a cool tool. So don't be afraid. Just like when I did my Photoshop one, I'm going to say the same thing here in the Corel one with Marvin before he gets to the Dockers. Don't be afraid to see what's behind the curtain. Don't be afraid to click those things up at the top, because you don't know what fun tools are actually in there that can help you to make your designs just pop. I mean, that's cool. I don't know. That's pretty cool. That.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. So, all right. Thank you, Marvin. You can go into your Dockers now.
Yep. So what I was trying to do earlier, so I've got the menu from the Zoom that's at the top of mine, so I can't get to some of these menus or some of the stuff that's hidden.
You can move it. Just click and drag it.
Click and drag. So it's highlighting the buttons, and so I was just worried. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. You can just move us right out of the way.
Got it. Thank you. So yeah, under window and Dockers, there are a lot of different Dockers, and really there's just different of these kind of tool layouts of how to interact, you know, ultimately with the design, the workspace and whatnot. I'll cover, you know, a couple of the ones or main ones that I use anyways. The properties one, I don't mess around with a whole lot. I'll show you one neat thing with it. So the properties though, individually tells you basically about what you have selected. So it's giving me my font, the type of fill colors, and if you have different lines selected, it'll show you like the line thickness and things of that nature. Depending on the version you have of Corel, this may or may not be available to you. I know it is in the full versions of under object and insert. There's this cool thing here called QR code that a lot of people ask about. So on QR code, it will drop one in here. I think it did in the center of the page. And the main reason that I use properties is to take this QR code and you edit what the URL is here. So if we do.
And you thought Marvin and I were using magic.
Right? Yeah, it's literally just Corel.
Yeah.
You know, change the URL. And then this is now the Sassy Subber website. And you can click the validate and it tells you that basically it contains that site.
That is cool.
And it's not the correct website, but okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So I just typed that in.
But you can actually go in. Well, let's talk about this. You can actually go in and change the color of that QR code too. And you can even add a picture.
A couple of different things. So I haven't done the picture, so you may have to tell me that one. But the color is an easy one. It's literally just here. So you can change the color of your QR code and you can change these dots. So right now they're these squares. You can change these to stars and that will still work.
That'll drive Beth size crazy.
Right? So you can change them to the shapes that they have here though.
Yep.
But I haven't done the picture.
So go up at the top.
Does that cost anything?
No, it's in your Corel. It's free.
I mean, it just goes right to your website and, you know, it don't cost nothing.
Correct.
Nope. And you can,
holy crap.
This
How do you think I was making my QR codes?
Right. And so this one, when I dropped in, so I just went to object, insert, and QR code. And this is the option that come up in terms of, again, this is in the properties Docker. The one I'm using right now is specifically the URL type of QR code. There are other types of QR codes. You can have ones that specifically go to an email address. So if you scan it on your phone, and it'll
I love the reaction on all their faces right now. This is great.
It'll pull up, you know, to actually email somebody, your contacts type stuff with phone numbers, calendar, you know, all those different things of types of, I haven't played with a bunch of these.
I have one for my email. I have one for my URL. And then I made one for a group for the calendar of events, because this way they know the calendar events. This is how I know where this is and what it is.
Yep. but yeah, so different options, different types.
What do you mean calendar of events? Like a specific event?
So you can actually, like your Google Calendar, you can have it go to like a Google Calendar, or if you have an event coming on, it could go to that. Yep, you can have it. But if you go at the top, Marvin, there's a picture one.
So here, I was just going to show real quick on the calendar event, it gives you like the event name, location, date stuff. So when somebody else scans that in, it should pull all that information into what they get on their phone in terms of.
But you can, right, the URL, you can have it look to your Google Calendar.
Right.
Yep.
So you're talking about this guy? Picture?
It should allow you to do it. I've done it before.
Yeah, let me change it to, sorry, let me change it to, I don't know if it does it on all of them.
I've been able to add a picture in the middle of mine.
This is all the transparency stuff under this one.
Why isn't it doing it?
That one says a summary.
Interesting.
I don't see the picture option. That's a folder, I think.
I don't know why I was able to add a picture in the middle of mine. Weird. But mine also just did an update not too long ago. So I'll have to go back. I haven't made one in a while. But
right. But I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of power here for sure.
Oh, yeah.
What it's able to do. And like I said, this is all just built right into Corel in terms of being able to create the QR code. So
which is great, a great selling feature for your clients. When they want QR codes, instead of making them go out and buy it, you're going to look like the rock star because you can create it.
Yep. And quick to do, right?
Yep. Very quick.
So that's the main thing. I showed you that cool
But
feature.
you can also create barcodes. If you go back into that thing, there was another thing. If you notice that, you can create barcodes for your own inventory.
Yep. You create your barcodes, enter in whatever code, and it'll pump out your barcodes. Yep.
So you can do that too. So Corel has a lot of fun features.
How do you scan that with your phone then for inventory?
A bar scanner, a barcode scanner.
You can get USB like barcode.
And you can, there is a barcode scanner on your phone that you can do it too. Yes.
Sure.
Believe it or not.
Yep. So yeah, the
Do
main
you
thing.
do that for your inventory?
What's that?
Do you guys do that for your inventory?
I've started it, yeah. And when I moved to Florida, that's exactly what we're gonna have. So I'm printing off all my barcodes, and then what it's doing, and that's what I've been working on. This is for Marvin and I. It's gonna literally, when I go to scan my barcode, it goes right to my Excel spreadsheet, and I can do inventory in and inventory out. It's it's not too complex of a program. Marvin and I've been dabbling in it, but yes, you can create your own barcodes in your own.
I want to be in that dabble. You got to peel my chin off the ground now.
Okay, don't worry, I got you. It'll probably be a whole class that him and I are going to sit and teach, so you guys can all have the same information.
Right. Yeah. So the main thing, circling back to, that was really the reason
Sorry, Marvin.
is the properties to really edit URLs. That's the main thing that I use the properties for. But the other things that were in there, like I mentioned, was like if you click on fonts, it's really related to whatever you're clicking on, that it gives you options related to the properties of that particular object.
Also where you can find, I'm going to say this word wrong, in your Dockers, you can find your, what is it, GIL? I can never say that word right. If you go into your Dockers.
Here?
Yes, that's.
Oh, yes.
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 So if you have that, that's where you find it for your fonts. A lot of people are like, where do you find it? That's where you find it. And it lets you know all the little fun wing dingy thingies that you can have that are in for your font. That's where you find it. That's the designer in me versus the designer or non-designer in Marvin. So I like the little add-on things for my design work. So there you go.
Some of the other ones here, Nicky mentioned, like the align and distribute. So when you click on a Docker within this window, they automatically show up on this right-hand side, and they're docked, if you will, over here all together, and they just give you this like tab that you can kind of click through to the different ones. You can drag these out of here. I don't remember if you showed that or not, but I use the align and distribute enough that I usually never have it here. I actually drag it out and I leave mine over here, just because I use it all the time.
But show them how to dock it though. Yeah, just so because like I was showing them how to move their palette. Okay. And I didn't actually move it because I hate moving my palette.
You get back sometimes.
Mine is all right. If mine's at the bottom, that's where mine is.
Yeah. So, and I put it back whenever I started the class. So I was like, well, I want to show I don't want to show you know how it was. So, but yeah, you just drag it back into that side, that menu, and it's trying to put it in different places here.
Yep.
And so I just dropped it back in there. The objects one is literally all your layers. So I've got a lot going on here. This file is multiple pages and there's a lot of objects. And so this, in terms of the objects layers or the number of objects that make up all the layers of this file, is enormous right now. But those allow you to end up selecting to go through pages if you have multiple pages on the document, or all the way to, say I'm on page 4. So if I just go down here and click on QR code, it's going to select that QR code.
Which reminds you, I did not have that on, and now I know why I needed it. So do yourself a favor and have it
Yeah,
on.
and so one of the things I think at one point you had mentioned in terms of like layer ordering, for example.
Yes,
Um,
shortcut keys.
yeah. So here, for example, these are both behind the QR code, and it just shows up. So here's my QR code at the very top, and those shapes are way down here at the bottom. So you can, for example, you can just click and drag them. There's one way you can literally move them. Or if you click on, and you can hold down Control on Windows, or I guess it's Command on Mac, and page up will slowly step that up.
You can also do Control Home.
Yep, and Home will move it all the way to the top of the, I believe it does the top of the document. So since I have multiple pages here, I believe when I click Home, it's going to give me a pop-up saying, hey, you're actually moving it to a different page. Is that acceptable? And it didn't, actually.
Oh.
Sometimes I've seen that message when it tries
Beth
to
has
move
her hand raised, so yes, Beth.
the physical hand raise.
What would be the, and I know this is probably the dumbest question on earth, but what would be the purpose of having different pages if you could do it in layers is my first question. And the second question is when you have all those curves on your objects, do you want to group them or so that it stays in like a folder for, or no?
You can. So a couple different things there. So the first one is pages. So the pages, one of the examples, so for you, like going back to like scrapbooking almost, for example, I don't scrapbook, so I don't know if this is a good example, but you can individually build out, say, a book, if you will, and literally have pages that go through and have different stuff on them, right? And then each page has its own group of objects, and you can group these, like you mentioned. So
the pages is more like an album when you have more than one page.
Sure.
And you can actually have 2 pages open at the same time, but that's a whole other Corel for another day.
Right.
I don't want to confuse you anymore.
Yeah, there is, I guess with the new, I think it's 2021 or the 2022 version maybe, they've added some different layout features where you can actually view like all your pages at once, almost like a book type layout and stuff like that, as opposed to here where I'm literally just clicking the pages at the
You
bottom.
can actually click it and drag it and whatnot, but yes.
Right. Yep.
All right, go ahead and the grouping. Did you answer the grouping question?
So the grouping, yes, you can individually, you know, pick say a set of objects and group those together. And just within your layers, that becomes a full group. And so regardless of which one you pick, now it moves them all as a group. You can absolutely do that.
Yeah, because the reason why I was asking is that one round bird one, like when you broke it to curves, it was like a gazillion
Right.
pieces.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Here it's all, well, it's not, I ungrouped some of it, but yeah, this can even get ungrouped further.
For the PC, it's Control G. To ungroup, it's Control U. Just so you're all aware.
So, I mean, it just breaks down further and further and further to how I have it grouped.
Right. So you see all your curves on the right hand side. That's what I was concerned about. All those layers or pieces.
Yes.
But you can group them together.
Right. So then it becomes just like one.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just grouped all those and now it's one there. So now they don't separate, they're all together.
Right. So like if you were to hit the letter P, it'll center it and then it didn't move. It moved everything at once instead of just that one particular layer. And it moved up because sometimes too, if you don't group it, and let's say I just grabbed them all and I hit the letter P, it's now going to make them all this mushy mess.
Oh,
And
yes.
if I grouped them together, they're staying in a spot that I wanted them to stay in versus having them all go mushy, to call it lack of a better
It'll be a
term.
crazy one because this has a lot of stuff on it. So if I select everything, I just hit Control A, and if I hit the letter P, it tries to put all of that. Hopefully it doesn't crash my Corel. Everything in the center.
Right. Where if he were to group it, if you Control Z, and then he groups it together.
Let's say I move it up here. I try to do it so it makes it more apparent when so now that I have it all moved, I'm gonna group everything together so it's all up here. And if I hit the letter P now that it's grouped, it just centers that whole section
Onto what would be the canvas space. So it doesn't look like it, but yes, that's what happens. So there's the difference of why you want to group it, especially if you're going to be moving something around. You can always ungroup it later, but at least this way it keeps everything in the spot that you wanted it in without having to go back through and shift and move and all that fun stuff. The next tool down on his Dockers is actually a recent tool for me. And I have to, you might want to just open up a new or use the pirate.
You're talking about yeah, so I was going
to step and repeat. Yep.
I'm assuming you're talking about step and repeat.
Yeah.
So if I have, say, like a 13 by 19 page, and I put my pirates in here, let's scale this down a little bit.
And I use this a lot for my stickers because I'm creating multiples for a page instead of just doing copy and paste and copy paste and whatnot. Watch what it does.
Yeah. So a couple things I'll mention before I do exactly that. We didn't touch on necessarily the rulers, for example. So those are up by default. And the reason I want to bring these up, and I'm going to take everyone back as far as we can to algebra class, unfortunately. Sorry. There is up here in this top left corner, this X and Y numbers, and those relate to your X and Y axis. Remember some graph paper, all the fun stuff, right? That was a joy. I know everybody enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin. Some of us did not excel like you did.
Right. So what these options up here allow you to do, so by default, and I'm sorry about this stuff is really small up here, this series of 9 dots allows you to pick the particular origin point that you want these X and Y coordinates to represent in terms of these numbers. And so if I have this very bottom left one selected, it's telling me the X and Y coordinates of this bottom left corner of pirates. And so, for example, if I want to space this and 1/2 an inch from this edge and 1/2 an inch from the bottom, I can literally type in here 0.5 and 0.5, and it moves it to exactly that space on your page, right? So I wanted to at least bring that about in terms of, that's kind of how that works in terms of your X and Y and these little series of dots to move stuff around. And then, so from there, so I spaced this one, was 1/2 an inch from, and then with our step and repeat here, I want to horizontally come across this way, right? With a spacing in between these of say 0.2 inches. And I'm not going to do any spacing vertically right now. And I definitely don't need 47 of them. I just need one number of copies, and hit apply, and it just tiles those across. Now from here, if I want to also have this spaced and 1/2 inch from this edge, I set this page up as a 13 by 19 page. One thing a lot of people also don't know is that these values up here accept some math. And what I mean by that is I can type in 13 because I know that's how wide my paper is. I know my ruler edge is over here at 13, and I want to subtract 1/2 an inch from there, which obviously is 12.5, but you can type in math there and it will do that for you. And then if I select all of those and go to my align and distribute, that I'm going to pop back out here because I like it over here. Again, just because I use it often. And with all those selected, I'm going to distribute them horizontally. So the spacing is the same across this way. Now I'll group those 3 together. And then we'll also space vertically 2/10 of an inch, and we'll go up the page.
Now you can, if you backtrack that, if you change the number of copies,
Yeah, you can change it to 5.
right, if you did 5, right, it'll do it in 5s for you, so you don't have to you know, do it one at a time. You can say, you know, if like 10 are going to fit, and then you try 10 and you're like, okay, that works, or, you know, whatever. And you could do the same thing for vertical and horizontal. And when you're doing things that need a lot of repeating, that is the quickest process.
Yep. Good step and repeat there. Corners, I don't know a good one to show corners on. I don't know if it'll let me do it on here. Let's try. I do use corners a fair amount, more so when I trace stuff and I end up with some sharp edges, or if I'm going to do, in my case, some die cutting, where I'm trying to cut all the way through. I don't know if you guys can actually see me because I know I'm screen sharing, but die cutting oh my goodness, a background stickers. And they have very tight corners. The corners, let me try to break this into a curve. And so this is no longer editable text, but I'll go to this corners Docker. And you can see how it's rounding these, because I have a significant radius here that's 1/4 of an inch. But if I make that 1/8 of an inch or smaller, you can kind of see how it plays with the corners themselves and just rounds those out.
And just hit apply, just so they can see it.
Just hit apply, and then it actually does curve them. So that's what corners does.
So that's great for people with SVGs, because if you're cutting it out on the Cricut or the Silhouette, your blades work a lot better on a curve than it does on a sharp corner. So that can help for those people who make SVGs.
Have you ever used find and replace, Nikki?
Briefly. I don't use it often.
So it's kind of neat, and this is not a great example. I'm purposely going through and doing a series of these. But say you've got a particular file and it has a lot of a particular color that you want to change. And you don't want to have to go in and pick each one of these and then change the color of. What find and replace will do is allow you to select something. It's kind of like it does in a document, like Word document, you find and replace. You can do the find from your selection. Oh, just kidding.
It's not gonna let you.
Maybe because it's grouped. Hang on. See if it lets me do just one at a time. Docker from selection. Okay. So usually this find all is grayed out, and this is just me kind of knowing the program a little bit. When I click find selection, I believe typically this is grayed out. It's available now. And when I click find all now, so essentially it loads these different parameters related to what I did the from selection on, and you can go in and edit these parameters. In this case, I know I'm only trying to do it based on this color. I'm gonna do a find all, and then it automatically selects all the purple ones, and then I can change all those to blue. So if you have a particular,
so much easier.
yes, instead of having to go in and put each individual one, and that's more so, I don't know if I've got a good example in any of these things that I've kind of done, but if you're trying to go and find, a particular color in a design and you're wanting to change that one color, and it's got a bunch of pieces, and you don't have to go select each and every piece that is that color, you can do find and replace to select all of those shapes that are the same color and then change them all at once.
Marvin, we have about 10 minutes left.
Yep.
So I want to take this opportunity first say thank you. Very well done, sir. You totally outshine me. That is for darn sure when it comes to teaching. So does anybody have any other questions? And it might be something that he can do another one later on, but for right now, your minds are completely on overload with all of the wonderful goodness that Corel has to offer. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. If you kind of just are on just information overload right now, it's that kind of thing. Let's see, Schlotted that allows changing colors, etc. for each element, correct. What is a Docker? So Debbie, did that answer what your Docker question is? Hopefully it did. And Shalata, did we answer your questions that says about color changing on elements correct? Please let me know. Go ahead, Shalata.
Yeah, like the round one with the bird,
Mhm.
like when he broke it apart into all the different layers and you could see them. You take like the little chicken wire.
Can
So
you
when you
change
break
the
it
colors?
apart like
Yes.
that, then you can change the color of the wire, things like that, and that just that one element without it changing the bird and everything.
On this one, I can't completely just because the way I've done this file, I have another file where I still have it in some pieces, but in this one, I actually did merge all of this stuff. I welded it together like that. So I can't break that apart any further, I don't think, or not to do the individual pieces like you're talking about. Let me see. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
clipped some of these out.
Right. But yes, I mean, parts of it, depending on what you're working on,
Right.
the short answer is yes, you can change that color.
Yeah.
But it's all going to depend on how you broke it up and how it breaks up, whether or not you're going to be able to change that.
Yep.
So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other further questions? Okay, that's kind of cool, I ain't gonna lie. All right. All right. So we're going to take this opportunity right now.
Can I show one more thing real quick?
Sure.
So this one was the JPEG file. And I did mention, so when you get Corel Draw, the full version anyways, it does come with the Paint Shop Pro as a additional program. They work really well. I'm not a good Paint Shop Pro user because I'm so used to using Photoshop. But what's really neat here, when you're working with JPEG or PNG type files, you can go straight to, I thought it was here, a bitmap. Oh, this didn't import as a bitmap. Let me convert it. Just how I actually imported it, I believe. I don't do
Yeah,
this
and then it should
often.
pop up to edit bitmap.
I'm not seeing the option, but I want to actually show exactly that. So I may just have to open a different one.
I think it's in edit
Oh,
bitmap.
here it is. Edit bitmap. Was that there before?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So when you do edit bitmap, sorry, it will take a second and it will open your.
It's probably the one of the longest programs to open up. I don't know why it takes forever to open up.
What's really neat though, to me, and again, I don't use it often, so I'm definitely not proficient in it. But when you edit stuff in here, say you needed to crop this or you wanted to edit something out, you know, I'm doing just eraser tool, right, and getting crazy. When you go to close this out, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to save these changes? And it doesn't even, it's its own CPT file. So it's not even saving as the actual JPEG. It's basically as its own nested object inside of here. It was like a smart object in Photoshop if you're familiar. But ultimately, if I click yes, what happens is it changes it in here.
Right.
So
There are
it
a lot of the tools too that we see in Photoshop for those who are Photoshop and Corel users. In Corel Draw or in the Paint Shop Pro part of it, there is a magic wand tool. I just can't remember where it is because I don't use it very often.
Yep.
But you can go in and find some of the same and similar tools that you would find over in Photoshop. So yes, there are different brushes that you can get. But again, it's not as complex, I guess, or fun as Photoshop in the Paint Shop Pro. This is, like I said, as somebody who has been doing graphic design now for 4 years, this is where I started. And you definitely can make a lot of amazing graphic designs in Corel. There just gets to a point where you might want to do a little bit more complex. And that's where you can sit down and learn Corel Paint Shop Pro. And then you can get further into that if that's what you want to do. A lot of people do design strictly only in Corel too. So there's no right or wrong, really. It's just your preference at that point.
Absolutely.
All right, we are getting down to the end of this, Mr. Marvin.
So it's fun.
All right, let's see. I'm going to stop you from sharing. All right, there we go. So I want to just say thank you very much, sir, to giving a very well in-depth on the Corel. I now got to step up my teaching game. He totally just one up the ante here. But I didn't know how to teach on Zoom. I can teach live and not have a problem. This part's new to me. So he's a little bit better at this than I am. So thank you guys for attending. And I hope you guys learned something. I will definitely be putting this up. It will end up on my YouTube channel, and you guys will be able to go back and rewatch and be able to, you know, the things that he learned and all of that, you know, that he taught that you learned from this. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Marvin. Don't reach out to me because I clearly know nothing. No, I do know a lot. I just don't guess show off what I know. So, and I learned a lot of it from him. So I would just rather you go to the source at this point. There's also YouTube channel, YouTubes that you can go on and look for something. Sometimes you might just need to pick our brain and say, okay, what is this called that I want to do? And then you could go and find a YouTube video on how to do it. And sometimes we'll go find it quicker for you and just send you the link and say, here you go. There's been plenty of times that both him and I have done that. So don't be afraid to ask. There is no such thing as a stupid question. But thank you guys. I'm going to stop the recording on this so that we can get to our regular scheduled Zoom Friday night. So give me 1 second.